live.
Yeah, we'll do it live. All right, let me see. It says we're live, but I don't see it popping up yet.
It's funny. There's a delay there because you say, I think it's live. I think it's live.
It's always in the video of me saying I think it's live. Yeah. But normally there's nobody there yet until they go back and rewatch it. So I'm gonna pop the chat out. But we are live, and if someone is in the chat, let me know. It has been working pretty well lately.
The chat.
Yeah. For a while, it was giving everybody some problems. So first,
true.
last, auspicious name. Be first in the comment section.
We should have a contest.
Yeah.
To see who, like the
Who's first. The very first one is just right on top. See, yeah. That would be good.
And we give
first one to post.
Or like maybe the top 5 people that comment first
are entered into, yeah.
Randomly choose a winner.
Yeah, exactly. I like it. Come up with something. What's up, Shoju's? There's 10 people watching. We are basically, Shay and I were just discussing this. We were here to tell you all how you're all gonna die. No, we were just thinking about all the. I don't even necessarily like the term fear mongering, because some of the things that they're saying is basically, I mean, I guess that's what it is, but it's I don't know, it's just hyperbole and just focus on the extreme. Because some of these things are realistic, you know, like a massive collapse, whatever. And I've titled this "The Coming Economic Collapse" because of that. But I don't know what you would call it. I mean, we've talked about this before, but everyone just goes right to the most extreme. And part of that's the type of person, like, you know, you and I, I'm sure, think about stuff like this as well. And anyone who's going to become a prepper, their mind kind of goes in that direction of like the what if to the limits. But to always be focusing on that exclusively, I think it's bad. You know, it's not helpful.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, and I did a video about this with I forget his name. So he's more of a gardener.
Yeah.
The
frost, what do you call it? The Ice Age farmer or something like that.
It doesn't matter who he is, but you know, every video was just like, you're you know, like
right.
running out of food, and it translates too with their thumbnails. Like, how many thumbnails are people like? Oh!
Yeah, like oh. I'm gonna start doing that.
How many of those do you got to see before it's like, okay, well, what's the message here? Is it 2 people, you know, like us, shooting the breeze back and forth, talking about preparedness-related topics, or are we, you know, using fear to try and bring users in constantly? It's like they're running out of ideas, so they need to get more and more extreme with their.
And don't you think after like 2 years of daily videos like that you don't look back and be like, maybe the world's not going to end right away? Because it's like a joke. They talk about some of these economic guys like Harry Dent, who they're like, he has predicted 100 of the last 3 recessions. And so all the prepper channels out there have predicted 1,000 of the last 2 minor shit the ban events.
Yeah.
But it's weird because, like I've always said, it's at the same time, like, this stuff is possible. You need to prepare for a lot of these things, but.
Well, not even the fear mongering, but what about the products, right? I mean, like, how many, this is scissors, but, you know, how many knives do you buy, you purchase? Right. You know, it's a sad thing is there's probably preppers out there. They're not preppers. These are armchair preppers that just purchase a bunch of products and they think they know how to prepare. There's probably some preppers out there that watch these knife reviews and they've got like 30, 40, 50 knives because some other prepper channel's like, yeah, it's a good knife. You know, here I did some cutting with the twigs on it and blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? The batoning, and they do it with every knife. So there's some of their audience purchases every single product they have.
Probably.
So, it's very funny. SPQR, what's my nickname for this guy? He's your buddy, right?
It's Cincinnatus. We can go with Cincinnatus.
Cincinnatus. Good evening. Mark Olson, I got your email. I'm going to send it to Eric, and we will have him showcase that meme a little bit later. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Prepper Trifecta.
This should have been a trifecta. It was my duty to get the guest for tonight, and I kind of dropped the ball on that. I legitimately thought I'd email them, and then was like, oh, I wonder why they haven't responded. And then I couldn't find the email that I never sent it, I guess. That's how on top of things I am. So we'll get some people, but I like occasionally just do this as well. It works out. But we'll get some awesome guests in the future as well. And feel free to suggest people, guys. If you want to email Che or myself, thewasteland@gmail.com. If you got people who you think would be interested, and I can't guarantee that we'll get them or that they'll be willing to, but give some ideas.
Yeah, I did reach out to Nate, Canadian Prepper. I've known him since, I remember we emailed years ago when he had like 5,000 subs. And I actually spoke to him on the phone once. Nice guy.
Cool.
I wouldn't bash him. I would just just shoot the shit, He's a prepper and see what he has to say. And I think we're talking about Prepper Princess was another one.
Get Morgan back on from Road Preparedness, possibly David the Good from the Survival Gardener. There's a lot of guys out there.
Oh God, yeah, I've got some here locally that don't have YouTube channels. I've just been lazy for contacting them. Hello, Alex McEwen.
Yep.
Nice to see you guys. Michael Smolensky, nice to see you.
But yeah, so I titled this "The Economic Collapse" because obviously we're talking about how you can't always go to the worst case scenario, but does take bear some thinking to see how this is going to go. Obviously, like we've talked before about how the U.S. government has printed like 40% of the dollars in existence within the last year, things like that. They're obviously you can find videos and books and everything from the 70s up through the 90s and 2000s about how the national debt can't get past this arbitrary number or else everything's going to fall apart. We've blown past every one of those. But at some point, these issues have to come home to roost. And what do you think? I guess it's the same in every industrial country. Like, is this something that we'll see? I don't see any particular reason, because I listen to guys like Peter Schiff and all these people, which they tend to be eventually correct, but they're always saying like, oh, we can't get to $20 trillion in debt or whatever. Then something has to happen by then. Then we get to $20 trillion in debt, and like, okay, well, certainly we can't get $30 or $40 trillion. And there's no particular reason why any one of these arbitrary points would cause some sort of collapse. There's a lot of it, especially when every other country or westernized country in the world is doing the same thing with their central banking model. But we are seeing prices get consistently more expensive on most things. So something's got to give eventually. So it's worth thinking about what that's going to look like.
Well, I think it'd be foolish not to think that the financial system isn't going to collapse eventually, especially with the pandemic. I mean, the financial collapse almost seems like it's going to be the byproduct in addition to mental illness. So I will say this much. I mean, I've met a lot of preppers over the years, and some of them are in it for the wrong reasons. There's some people who are mentally ill that are into preparedness, and then there's some people that are in it for the right reasons. The most intelligent preppers I've met seem to have, if it's not number one, it's at the top of their list. Financial collapse being a very real and present danger. It's a very complicated system, and it's interdependence. So if things do go AWOL in the US of A, then there's certainly, with a major country like America, there's certainly going to be a ripple effect with other major countries because of what happens. So who knows? I don't know how you get out of that game, because of the exponential, everything's so virtual now, there's so much debt. It's not sustainable. There's so much inflation.
No. Yeah.
Like how does it, when does it end? What triggers the breaking point?
Right. And will there be a specific breaking point? Like a lot of people are focusing on there being a point, as opposed to just look at how worse things are now in some economic metrics versus 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And is that just going to keep going until all of a sudden we're look like more like a third world country than a first world country? Obviously, there's a couple big things like the world reserve currency being the US dollar, things like that could change and cause a lot of chaos. But beyond that, just the general kind of decline of the economy, it's hard to imagine, or not imagine, but it's hard to calculate a specific point at which any one of these things become a problem, because none of them are occurring in a vacuum. You can look at like the national debt, things like that, but again, it's not happening in a vacuum. There's international issues going on. There could be wars and other stuff that's domesticated, like what happened with the coronavirus. that might have covered up a significant decline in the stock market, and they've had something to blame it on, which otherwise they wouldn't have, and may have had people who lose faith a lot more in the system. Whereas now it gave them an excuse to print a lot of money without making it seem like it's for economic reasons. You know what I mean? It's done for stimulus reasons because of this event, not because the economy was weak otherwise. So it kind of gave them cover to that. Where would we be without that? It's hard to say.
Oh, they had to think of something, with these stimulus checks. They had to give some part of the population money for food because we couldn't work because of the pandemic. So I think I hate to give a vote of confidence within governments, but I'd like to think they had that forethought or foresight to be able to come to those conclusions to say, okay, well, 80% of the population is sitting at home. They can't work. If they can't work, they can't get food. So we're going to have all sorts of other bad shit, crazy things happen unless we figure out a way to solve this issue. What happens? I don't know, man. Like, worst case scenario, everybody has the shot, or most of the population have their shot in the fall, and businesses open up, and we all get together, we sing Kumbaya, and we are dancing around in the streets, and the pandemic's over, and then everything's good. The best case scenario. Worst case, who knows, man? Like,
well, I think the worst case scenario is like we're talking about, like there is just a collapse of all of a sudden there's a very dramatic loss of faith in the US dollar for whatever reason.
I mean, we can talk about what the first signs of a financial collapse would be, but ultimately what in your opinion, what do you think happens in a financial collapse? Let's just say September financial collapse is going to happen. It's just the straw that broke the camel's back. Is it that the cost of food would just be too expensive? Like, what do you think
It's a good question, because I think there's a lot of ways that it could go, and it depends on, like I said, what kicked it off and the government's response to it. So if the government doesn't do anything and let the natural course play out, there would be a massive deflationary cycle of some kind, debt collapse. But they're not going to let that play out that way because they have no control over it. They can control an inflationary collapse a lot better, at least gives them something to do, and at least everyone's employed and things like that. They can control people. They can still pay the police and the military. They're not just going to be like, oh, well, we'll just let it collapse and there's no money anywhere and no jobs or whatever. They're definitely going to go, and they're already doing it now. They're definitely going to go the route of yield curve control, printing money, things like that, maybe even issuing direct stock purchases, stuff like that from the Fed just to boost the market. So I definitely think that whatever the initial stages of any sort of collapse are, which would probably result in the plummeting stock market or real estate or things like that, it's going to come right back with them just dumping massive quantities of money into the system and trying to control it. So we'll see some sort of inflationary cycle at that point.
Yes. As a prepper, what do you think that we could transcend? I have some ideas in my head with respect to if a collapse occurs, then preppers should probably focus in certain areas. Where do you think preppers should focus on? Because it's up in the air in terms of a collapse later this year or 2 years from now. We're certainly going to feel a negative effect financially. But what constitutes a collapse, and then maybe the severity or devastation, that level, are we going to be, is like going to be 1900s where you had like a wheelbarrow full of money to buy a loaf of bread?
I think it could be, but I think it'll be digital. Obviously they're not going to print paper money like that, which will make it even easier for them to go the inflationary route than it was, back in those days. So definitely that's going to be the option. They may even switch to some sort of new type of dollar or something. But in terms of what people should do, in terms of your basic preps, it's always the same stuff: food, water, shelter, power, protection. But financially, you want to just focus on anything that's not denominated in dollars. That could be gold, silver, precious metals, any commodity, land, copper, cryptos, any foreign currencies, whatever, anything that's not denominated in dollars. But in terms of specific physical goods too, I would focus on making sure we have stuff that's not made here in the US. If you can't get it here in the US, it'll go up a lot more in price, I think, than the stuff that is made here. So, whether that's food or, like something like oranges, yeah, we make a lot of those in the US, but other certain types of food we may import, or certain types of gear, which basically is everything nowadays. There isn't a whole lot other than agriculture that's made in the US these days. So I would try and make sure you have that stuff squared away.
It's good you mentioned that because that's probably number one on the list. If we had a financial collapse, what can we do as preppers to be better prepared for it? What are we going to see if there's a collapse?
Right.
Probably see a lot of crazy prices, and you got to think about
Sure.
what you want and what you need. And I was thinking the same way. Food would be at the top of the list because food would be very expensive, I suspect.
Food, energy, yeah.
Yep. And that got me thinking too, fuel would probably be a big one.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I don't know if people are rotating their stocks with gasoline, but it's certainly plausible that would be a valuable commodity down the road if a financial collapse occurs. The government would step in some way, I think.
Right. They'd be trying, but the more they print money, the more it's going to devalue the currency too. And I think the coronavirus stuff could give us a glimpse into it. Like, what's the type of stuff that everyone is going, stuff like bicycles, things like that. I mean, obviously certain things are specifically related to the pandemic, like masks and whatnot. But with a general, there would be some sort of kind of economic shutdown that wouldn't be forced by rules, but it would just be because economic activity is sort of, I don't know, it's kind of weird because there'd be a shutdown, but simultaneously it'd be hyper sped up because of people would be trying to transact with their increasingly worthless dollars. But certain industries and stuff would probably have almost no activity because it was like a luxury type stuff, versus others would be probably hyper, that you wouldn't even be able to find stuff anymore.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot of industries or businesses. I think that if we were experiencing financial hardship, we would certainly see industries relating to things that we don't need. So
right.
I'm trying to think of something. One thing that popped in my brain was these oxygen bars.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You put this thing in there, you lay there.
Breathe flavored oxygen.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like anything that we don't need as humans. Well, ironically, we need oxygen, but you know what I'm saying? The superficial sort of, those industries are going to be the first to go. And it's going to go right back to the core things that we do need. As we're saying, food, water, shelter, energy would be big. That's why I think the government would have to come in, or they'd have to figure something out, because if you've got most of the population isn't prepared.
Right.
And we are, so we've got stockpiles of food and different forms of energy. The government will need to compensate the way they did with the stimulus checks,
right?
To give leverage to everybody else. Hello, Stephanie Joe Roundtree, and hello, it was another hardcore fan, Donna Hoffman, loyal. I like seeing these same names pop up every week. Good evening, welcome. Ripper Trifecta, sponsored. Sponsored by new one.
Corona. Speaking of Corona, someone was mentioning. This is I don't know if I mentioned this on the podcast before or on our Trifecta thing here, but I've kind of been a question I was wondering, because we see everyone. You have to tell me if I already asked this or not. But like, what is the mainstream kind of accepted explanation for why it's important for everyone to get the vaccine, even people who don't want to? Like, that's a legitimate question. I honestly don't know what the answer is. Someone could post in the chat, because I mean, like, supposedly they'll tell you the vaccine is 100% success rate of preventing hospitalization or serious illness from coronavirus, which I think is true at this point. This doesn't take into account anything else that might be happening when you take the vaccine. But let's assume that that's just true. It's a 100% success rate. If you take the vaccine, you will not be hospitalized or die from coronavirus. Then you basically have nothing to fear from coronavirus at that point. So why is it necessary for anyone who doesn't want it? If anyone who wants it can get it and be 100% protected, why is it so important for everyone to have it? I mean, I've seen the herd immunity, but why does herd immunity matter? If everyone who wants to be protected can be protected, what does herd immunity even mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I certainly, given my insight, I don't think it qualifies.
Like, it's free. You go to Walgreens, you're like, I'm afraid of coronavirus. Bam, you're 100% protected apparently now at zero cost. What does herd immunity even mean?
Maybe the pressures there are much more stringent and serious in the States. I know in Canada, it's everybody has their own opinion. I don't think there's a lot of gray. There's a lot of gray area in terms of, they're certainly recommending it. The government is saying you should get it. And here we go. All right, Brian, I was waiting.
All
I was gonna
right.
say, yeah. All right. Always glad to support the channel, Eric. What about me?
Get your own fans. But I'll hit Brian's question really quick. What do you think of Biden's? Yeah, go for it. What do you think about Biden's gun program? Well, obviously, I knew he was going to be trying to do something in regards to gun control. I looked over briefly about the stuff that he mentioned, and a lot of it is hopefully, and this is the impression that I get, is that he's kind of doing what it takes to make it seem like he's doing something without actually having to make a lot of restrictions that he knows is going to get overturned by the court or be wildly unpopular. So if you look at the list, most of the things are like direct the ATF into looking into doing this, or direct this organization into coming up with a plan for doing this, and they're not actually directly, the executive orders aren't directly creating limitations, or because obviously that's not legal anyway to just by executive fiat to control a lot of things, especially that are constitutionally protected and to have Supreme Court cases already about a lot of these issues. So like he's directing these organizations to look into or to issue guidelines for what they want to do with ghost guns and things like that. So he hasn't actually really done anything, and he's just kind of asking these government agencies to come up with plans. So I'm hoping that's just his way of kind of throwing a bone to the gun control crowd, and that they're not going to push too hard, but we can't count on that, obviously. So far, and a lot of the stuff, they're just, like I said, they can't, based on the Constitution and existing case law and stuff, it's going to be very difficult for them to legally do anything anyways. And I don't think that we're at the point that they're going to be doing direct illegal confiscations and stuff like that. So hopefully that, but it's certainly not helping ammo prices. Jesus, so expensive. So I definitely say, I think everybody should stay frosty when it comes to the gun stuff, but I don't see anything super concerning specifically yet, other than that the general climate of the administration is obviously very anti-gun. Yeah. I was going to say, Cincinnati said ghost guns can show a 30 caliber 30-round magazine clip in half a second. Exactly. Fully semi-automatic, bro.
That's why you got to be more like us. We've got restrictions on full automatic. It's all semi-auto here, but you know, the Americans, they just let it all out.
Right. You just buy one at the gas station.
It's going to be strategic, so with every shot counts. Just to let it all out. I think things might change if Kamala, is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah. I don't know. Kamala is supposedly wrong and racist to say it wrong.
Is it?
It's racist to say her name wrong, but I don't know which way is right.
I remember the tweet. We should have that as like a part of our intro, the tweet that she did. Because I know you like that tweet. It's like, you're going to be the next president.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to be the next president.
If she comes into power, I could see a lot of really batshit crazy ideas being thrown on the board.
I definitely can.
It would certainly involve gun control.
Yeah, for sure. How many people make ghost guns? I mean, when you're talking about just people making weapons from partial lowers and things like that, 80% receivers, it's a lot, but I mean, they're just a gun, you know? And to what extent having like a serial number on a gun matters for anything anyway, without a national registry, which there isn't and there should never be, hopefully, then it really is irrelevant for the most part. It's just fear mongering on their part. They're like, oh my God, there's an unregistered. People don't even know what that means. Like when you buy a Walmart or something isn't registered in the sense that they can just automatically know who it belongs to always. You might be able to have somewhat of a paper trail of who bought it first or something like that, but in many states it's still legal for cash sales and things like that, as it should be. So it's really, there's literally nothing more to fear from the ghost gun than there is from any other gun. And to the extent that that genie is out of the bag technology wise, or out of the bottle rather, you can't put it back in. So like restricting law-abiding citizens' use of this technology is in no way going to prevent criminals from doing what they want to with that stuff. Like you just have to have a $200 3D printer and files that are already all over the internet to make a Glock loader or something.
Not even just that. I mean, iron pipe, shotgun shells. I mean, like these things could be made.
Sure, yeah.
They could be machined out if people want to get creative. Karachi Kung Fu. I'm here for Che. Thank you very much. I have 8. It's like it's the opposite. You've got your buddy Brian.
There you go.
I've got Karachi Kung Fu. Hello to Colorado Biker. And Alex McHugh says he's not going to send me money. Otherwise, I'm going to spend it on beer. I don't know what that.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah, what's the problem with that? It's certainly when it comes to firearms, though, it's certainly a hot topic for liberals. It's this battle back and forth between Republicans and Democrats. It's never going to end. It's always the same here in Canada. It's never going to end. There's always going to be this battle where you're dealing with a ignorant-minded Democrat, and they're not all anything, right? So I don't want to come out of the gate arms swinging, stupid, but there's certainly a lot of irrationality with respect to the reasons why they wish to ban certain things, firearm specific. So I'm wondering if we should have Colorado Biker join us for the latter half of this show. Be nice to get his.
Looking to get him on. One thing someone had said recently about the gun control that was funny was that someone in the government, I don't think it was Biden himself, but it may have been, but someone said something along the lines of, we should go after gun control the way we go after drugs, basically, like the war on drugs. And I was like, if they made a war on guns the way they did a war on drugs, the CIA would be handing out semi-automatic or fully automatic weapons on the street corner and stuff. That'd be probably the best thing that happened. Okay, they haven't exactly done a good job of controlling drugs. There'd be guns everywhere if that were the case.
Well, there you go. Looks like our friend Colorado Biker is coming to LV.
Las Vegas. Awesome. Good deal. Is that on one of your bike tours? That would be great.
All right. There's a new name.
All right. Dale Jones. I appreciate it. It has been reported that China has a digital currency with an expiration date to force holders to spend it. Will Bitcoin end up like this? In the sense that it will have an expiration date on it? I seriously doubt it. I don't know. I don't foresee Bitcoin itself ever being modified in that way. To what extent I even know that it could be, I'm not sure. But there probably will be different types of cryptocurrencies, maybe even the type that the central banks are going to come up with. And I really do think most central banks are going to come up with some kind of their own digital currency. But I don't think Bitcoin specifically would have that. But that's interesting that China, that's an interesting way of kind of forcing money velocity, because there's always the jokes about the stimulus money going into the stocks like game stocks or guns and gold and all this other stuff that they don't really want us to be spending your money on, but bottom line is they want you to spend it. So making it have an expiration date is one way to do that.
Fascinating. Dale, thanks for that. I appreciate the very cool. It's certainly been my hobby horse lately, crypto. It's living, breathing, thinking crypto. I called XRP a few weeks ago on this channel, on this show, 4 months ago. And it is.
What was it at then? Like 50 cents or something?
Ridiculously low. Yes.
Yeah. And now it's at $1.35 or something like that.
That's just going to grow. You still have time to get in. Can you tell me, Dale, if you don't mind, can you put in the comments section the name of this particular crypto? And I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, because that fascinates me to put an expiration. Bitcoin, when you compare things to Bitcoin, Bitcoin is the name. People know Bitcoin. Everybody thinks crypto Bitcoin. It's that brand. But the reality is it has no utility. It doesn't have a function. It doesn't do anything. We just all sort of collectively agree and believe.
Yeah, it definitely is benefiting from first mover advantage, as they call it. But if you take any technical aspect of Bitcoin, there's going to be at least one, if not multiple other cryptos that do that better. And some of them will do basically everything better. But it's got the name, the unique element of at the time, is the first. So that gave it that name recognition. And there are good things about it, to be sure, but it's not the best in pretty much any aspect.
It's like a third generation technology, really. It's
right.
It's very slow to do the transactions. It takes an immense amount of energy to actually win Bitcoin. So there's certainly new ones out today that are superior, that have practical utility, like VE Chain. There's no one coming out to Flare through Spark, and there's some that have utility in terms of how you interact. It's crypto.com is one called CRO, in which you can take cryptocurrency and put it into a debit Visa. Now, that's pretty damn practical to me, because you can go anywhere in North America with a Visa debit card, purchase real things. So the fact that they're putting a slant on a digital to put a timestamp on it seems quite fascinating to me.
Yeah.
What's the name of it?
Yeah, in Colorado Becker Prepper, if we get to we'll probably send it to you in a few minutes. I'll let you know when I send it.
Yeah, I'll see you on.
And Tokay says, what happens when the power is out with crypto? So obviously, yeah, this is a financial instrument not really suited for legit, serious grid down shit the fan scenarios. But that kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of this video, is you have to have a plan for everything, not just the grid down shit the fan scenario. And I mean, just looking back, we're talking about, you can read Mel Tappan books from the 70s about prepping and everything, and society's been here the whole time. There still hasn't been a massive grid down scenario. And while that's certainly possible, it's actually more possible that doesn't happen. So we have to prepare for that too. And it's more likely that you'll have minor localized shit fan events, and we'll come out of the other side of it, like this major power outage in Texas, like one country has a economic collapse, but it doesn't, have a complete loss of grid power, civilization, things like that, weather events, even war and stuff like that. So unless you do have a total permanent, almost permanent loss of utilities and internet and stuff, then you'll at least be able to sit on the crypto and have it come out on the other side usable. And to some extent, you could even travel with, your hard wallet and just use it somewhere else. Like I said, unless the entire Earth is wiped out in an EMP event or something,
Certainly could, and worth mentioning again that you brought this up last week, as we'll get into the blackout situation in a second, at least by a brief perspective on it. But you had said, look, if you're going across the country or going to Costa Rica, I've got a buddy, a prepper, he's loaded. He's going to Costa Rica, and they want to know how much gold he's importing. You can certainly get away with, and that's the beauty with crypto. It's none of your damn business. You can hide what you're worth, or your resources in some respects.
Right. So you don't even have to sit on all crypto, but just having the ability to knowledge the account or whatever to set that up, so that if you do need to do it, you don't have to go through the whole process of getting verified on one of these exchanges, making your account, then when at the same time that everyone else is trying to do this too. You know what I mean? So you want to at least have that system set up so that you can do that. Doesn't mean you even have to but I'm actually going to make a video soon, and I'll probably get with you about this too, about how there's some pretty low risk, almost zero risk ways of getting involved in crypto. Like some of the bigger exchanges like Coinbase, like I post a link, you sign up for it and deposit $100, you get $10, I get $10, and then you can just tell everyone else to do that. Before you know, you have a few $100 in there that you didn't actually pay anything for, and then you have the account at least too. And then on Coinbase specifically, I've probably got close to 100, maybe $150 by just watching these videos on like a new crypto, and they'll give you like $3, $2 for like watching this 3-minute video and like taking a 2-question quiz at the end, because they're just trying to drum up interest. And it's literally, they just deposit money in your account then after it's like wild. So it's pretty easy to get a few bucks in there. So it's definitely, you don't have to just put your whole paycheck into crypto, YOLO your retirement account into crypto to get involved.
The hacker mind is just drumming up ideas to automate going through a process to do everything from a programming perspective. Colorado Biker, I got to send them the link. He said if we had a Carrington event, then trillions would be lost. And it's
absolutely. Correct. But that's with some sort of massive EMP or something. We're talking about one of the worst kind of shit fan events that you could realistically have, barring like a planet-wide nuclear war or something. So I mean, I wouldn't worry about that. Like all the preps that we have are going to help us out in that time too. But you can't just like plan. You can't basically not do things for like your retirement or your future because they would get wiped out by a massive EMP. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Okay.
For people that don't know, Carrington was it was natural EMP that happened in, I want to say, the 1850s.
Like a solar flare, basically.
Yeah, and it didn't really affect society. I think it was there were reports of electromagnetic pulse,
Mhm.
and it didn't affect society because we weren't very reliant on energy or power at the time. But I
Right.
recall reading reports where I think I want to call them telegraph
Yeah,
operators.
telegraph cables I think were fried and stuff.
Yeah, so do Morse code over these systems where they actually had a shock on their fingers when they were
If I'm not
trying to send.
mistaken, it actually did like melted some of the cables or fried some of the cables too,
Which, yeah, I don't recall reading that, but it's certainly plausible considering the old equipment.
yeah, and
Probably.
I mean, for those who, from my understanding of it, I'm not an expert at EMP, but a Carrington type event like a solar flare is actually going to be a little bit different than like a nuclear bomb EMP, to where mostly long stretches of like cable and stuff would be mostly affected. So like power outages and things like that would be probably more severe and widespread, but smaller type of electronics might not be fried, like with flashlights and maybe even your cell phone or things like that, because it doesn't, the wavelengths are different of the electromagnetic radiation, so it doesn't collect in the same way. Whereas the opposite would probably be the case for like a nuclear EMP, where small fragile electronics like circuit boards and things like that would be fried, but things like a power plant or power cables and stuff would probably be fine. But no one really knows for sure how these things play out because it just simply never happened before, with the exception of like the Carrington event.
Yeah, certainly. I should reach out to Michael Maloof. He's an author, The Nation Forsaken. He's got a great book on EMPs, or Jerry Manuelson, or even 1 Second After, that author. EMP is a great topic. We should really get a guest for that. And I'm glad you said that. I don't know, because there's so much bullshit out there, bullshit information.
Right.
You need to do this. This is going to happen. We don't know, because what if the severity of the EMP is 75,000 kilowatts as opposed to 50 or 120, and it's prolonged over a period of time, geomagnetic storm? How is that going to? We don't know how it's going to affect certain things. Nobody can say it with absolute certainty. Even the experts will say that. So when anybody says, "Oh, we have an EMP and this is going to happen 100% for sure," then it's hard to believe them. I'll say this for sure, though: if we have a Carrington event, forget crypto. We're going back to Pioneer Village.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why I was talking about, like, if it's really that level of like a global or continent-wide EMP event, like the money you have in your online accounts is going to be literally the last of your concern. You're going to be wishing you'd spent it on like plows and horses and hand scythes and stuff at that point.
Believe it or not, I spent $500 on it. I was making a lot of money.
A mill?
A mill grinder, yeah, the Harvest mill grinder. Like, it's one of the best ones out there, because just in case, right? So I can grow my own wheat, make my own bread, sort of thing. So it's plausible. Do I think it's going to happen? Are we going to see Carrington events? I don't know. Maybe some of the other prepper channels will tell you. The fear mongering, like, it's going to happen.
Right.
I don't have a crystal ball. It's plausible, but I'm certainly not going to live in fear.
Right.
Thinking about it.
And just like I was saying, looking back at, okay, let's look at the last few hundred years of human history. Like, how many of these events have there been? Arguably one that nowadays would have caused a major disruption, versus how many minor, like, civil unrest instances or military conflicts or economic disruptions or weather events or job loss, individual shit events scenario. Like, that stuff happens all the time, and the things that you would need to prepare for all that stuff are overlap pretty well with the major ones, with the exception of the really extreme self-sufficiency type stuff that you would want in a massive grid down event. So definitely take care of the basics.
Yes, absolutely. I forget I was talking about this last week, and we were talking about EMPs, and this was for provincial, so the equivalent to the state of, we'll just say the state of California.
Yeah.
So it was their sort of emergency management component that they had for that state, and it didn't bother me, but it was like, okay, well, it was almost like expected. So the state or the province of Ontario, they've got Emergency Management Ontario. And if you look at their disaster area preparedness, they talk about the 72-hour kits. You have some food on hand, and you got to, maybe have some cash, access to your ID on a flash drive, sort of the basic stuff. And they go through the disasters: flooding, fire, blackouts, tornado, like it's all listed there. But one thing they don't talk about, even on a federal level, nobody talks about EMP. And I know for a fact that we're grossly unprepared as a country. I suspect America is probably as well.
Oh yeah.
Grossly unprepared. If we actually have an EMP, it's like it would be such a shock to the system. They don't even talk about it. Like there's nothing, you know what I mean? It's not like, oh, this is on the category of disasters that could happen. It's like we would be so screwed.
Yeah, it's so done for. Looks like Colorado Biker Prepper is back with us. Welcome.
Cool.
Howdy. How you guys doing?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Doing wonderful.
Awesome. Glad to hear it.
Is the camera angle better this time?
Looks okay.
He's watching. He's listening to my every word. Nice to see you.
Yeah, it looks good from here.
All right, good.
Yeah, so it sounds like you've done a little bit of research on EMP type events as well, based on your comments.
Yeah, I've done a lot actually. So it's last October, I think it was last September, October, we missed an X-class solar flare by about 20 hours.
Okay.
We would have been hit by an X-class solar flare, which is the same as the Carrington event.
Right.
So yeah, they do happen. It happens about every 8 solar cycles. There's usually a big X-class or theta class solar flare. So they do happen. They happen fairly regularly. The thing is, they don't affect humans. They don't affect organic life or anything like that.
Right.
Usually we don't notice them.
Right. So it's obvious that they're not, at least unless we got a massive direct hit or something, that they haven't to this point caused any major disruption other than maybe spotty communications, things like that.
Yeah, there was an event back in the, I think it was the 90s, early 2000s, Eastern Canada. They felt the effects of a lesser solar flare, and that knocked out their power grid and communications in that area for several days. So they do happen, but it's nothing on the magnitude of the Carrington event.
I'm from that area, and I'm very familiar with the event that you're talking about. Colorado Biker, would you mind speaking up a bit I'm having a hard time hearing you, if you don't mind.
Oh, sorry. Let me turn up my mic. So let me do that. Sorry.
Whoa. Okay, I'm going to interrupt you for a second because this is my first super chat ever.
Oh, there you go, from Brian.
Bob, thank you very much. Canada doesn't even want to join as a partner in U.S. missile defense. I wonder why. No comments on Canadian government policy. Brian, thank you. He's like the #1 fan. So that's awesome, man. I appreciate that.
My guess is that it would just be finances. They don't want to pony up. That'd be the U.S. pretty much takes the brunt of all these any sort of military relationships financially that it has with a bunch of different countries. So if they think they can get away with not submitting a bunch of money, then they're probably going to try that. Eric, nothing wrong with drinking. Che can't handle his beer. What? Who says that? Who thinks Che can't handle his beer?
Anyways, what are your concerns, Colorado Biker, with respect to, we'll go into 2 different areas here. We talked initially about finances. Do you think there's a breaking point to indicate there's going to be a financial collapse? And where do you feel that Prepper should be focusing in their energy? If we have a financial collapse, what can the audience do? What should we, should we start throwing up on foods, precious metals? What do you think?
Okay, is my audio better now?
Much better.
Okay, good. Sorry, I had it on the wrong setting. It was actually coming through the webcam, and I hate that thing.
Yeah,
as for currency, first of all, as economic collapse in the United States, we are very, very unlikely to see something like that probably in our lifetime. Just because we use a fractional reserve banking system, we use a fiat-based currency, and there's way too many ways for them to manipulate the markets to prevent that type of a crash. So it's highly doubtful. We're not going to see anything on the level of something like the Weimar Republic in Germany or what they had in Zimbabwe. with their currency going crazy. So that was due to some very specific circumstances, and we have mechanisms to do that. It's because we have fractional reserve banking. It's a problem, but I don't see, a central bank is going to be able to manipulate it in such a way that an actual financial collapse or runaway inflation and hyperinflation are unlikely. We may see higher inflation, which that is something that I would be more likely to prep for. Something like we had in the 1970s during the OPEC oil embargo. We did have much higher inflation then. It's almost double of what it is now.
We don't have a lot of time left. When you say prep for, what would you recommend to the audience? What should they?
Precious metals are good. You can do that. I wouldn't have a problem with that. Gold is a bit difficult because it is such a high value. Silver is always a good option. Silver is readily available. It's recognizable, and it has a much lower value. That's what I have. I stack quite a bit of it. So I like to keep a lot of silver in the gun safe too. And that's, good place to store it too. Cryptocurrency. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. And there are a lot of ways to get into it. And it may be insulated against anything like we have with hyperinflation or runaway inflation, because the value is not directly linked to the predominant currency. So that's not a bad idea. So, and the other things is just your normal preps, food would be a big one. But also what I would say would be a really good prep also, especially in the case of currency crisis, would be tools, implements, things that would actually other people would need, like a rake, a shovel, something like that. Have an extra, have two extras, something that you could trade that would be valuable to other people. That would be really valuable. Toiletries, that's another thing that I do. Since I travel so much, I go to hotels all the time, and I always ask for extra soaps and shampoos, those little soaps, those little shampoos, a little toothpaste. They give them to you for free at hotels. Get them. And I got a huge giant bags of them that I put aside. They don't go bad, and they're great trade and barter items. That's something else that would help fend that off, would be trade and barter items. So hope that answers it.
I think I want to go down the EMP train, because I personally have always found it fascinating, and I could never get tired of speaking about it. Somebody's asking in the audience, what is an X flare?
An X-class solar flare. That is when the sun, they typically arise from sunspots where you have a area of low activity in the sun itself, in the coronosphere. And actually on the surface of the sun, this is where magnetic areas of the sun that constrain and hold back the plasma weaken, which allows huge amounts of this highly energized plasma to burst out from the sun, which we call a solar wind. We always get a very light solar wind, but occasionally the sun basically farts. And it farts in all directions. So it just depends on whether it's facing us or not. Solar flares happen all the time. And when they do, these highly charged plasma particles travel at nearly the speed of light. If we get an X-class solar flare, it's about 8 to 12 minutes from the time that it happens to the time that the first part of it affects us. Typically, not always.
Let me interrupt you there. How much time? And that's correct. How much time do we have? It's not that these gases are interacting so that it burps, like you were saying, and it just happens to be that it needs to align with the planet Earth in order to burp in that direction.
Right.
My understanding is I believe it's 3 days that we have. So this, like today, it could be formulating, and we could get a notice from NASA tomorrow morning. Right. We've got 2.5 days. I believe it's 3 days.
It's 3 days. Actually, it could be anywhere. It depends on the intensity of the solar flare itself. Okay. So it could be anywhere outwards of 8 days. We now have the Chandra X-ray Observatory orbiting the sun, and that monitors the sun in the X-ray spectrum, because visible spectrum is next to useless for observing solar activity. So the Chandra X-ray Observatory is what watches that. You can actually go to NASA and they have a page just for the X-ray Observatory, for Chandra X-ray Observatory. But with that new observatory, that was just put out recently. So with that new one, we might have even up to 8 days. If it's a low intense, or if it's a low speed ejecta, we could have up to 8 days. But you're right, the average would be 72 to 36 hours before something like that would hit us.
The X flare is the largest of the different types.
No, there's larger ones.
Oh, is there? I thought the X was the biggest.
X is the largest one that we have recorded and that we've seen. Other suns that are the same size as ours, they can actually have coronosphere ejections, which there's no point in prepping for that because we'd be dead. It would literally fry the planet.
Let's stay in this.
Yeah. Well, no, it could happen with our sun. It is an actual possibility.
Okay, fair enough. I wasn't familiar with that, but the one point I wanted to stress out to the audience is it's not like we would have a lot of time. I mean, if we had a large scale EMP, it would be, and let's just say it's 8 days. Let's just say it's 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's not a lot of time to prep for an EMP.
And that's just when they would, like, the people manning these observatories would first know. By the time that information trickled down to normal people who weren't, you know, directly following that sort of thing, it might not have much time at all, or you might not ever get the notice.
Yeah, it'd probably be 24 hours would probably be the most realistic. They would say, hey, we're about to get hit. You can prepare against it, or prepare for it. And Louis Faraday, the father of magnetism and electromagnetism, basically showed us how to make a Faraday cage, which is basically a mesh cage or a metal container that is properly grounded, that the electrons that are split from the atmosphere go around whatever's inside that cage. It makes a protective shell around anything. You can make one from just a simple galvanized metal trash can that on the inside has been insulated with foam or thick layers of cardboard. So you can make your own for relatively inexpensive. I have I think it's a 32-gallon galvanized trash can that I use for that.
Yeah, I have a little one myself, but I have some emergency radios, different flashlights, different small electronics like that in.
Right. Yeah, you can do that. You can put that in there. It's pretty simple to do. There's plenty of videos on it. One thing that you do have to be sure about, though, is that it is either not grounded at all or it is properly grounded. Because if it's improperly grounded, it could start a fire.
Interesting.
The same effect as a welding rod.
Right.
It will concentrate the heat and the electrons in one area and become molten. So you got to be careful. But as long as you can make a decent Faraday cage and you put those electronics in there. So if you have 24 hours notice, you can take the radios that you have. You can take, like, for example, I have right here, I have a couple, but this is the one I have personal. It's one of those little portable hard drives.
Yeah.
This portable hard drive, it's 2 terabyte. It has all of my important financial documents, all my other documents that have been scanned in it, scanned on it, all my business stuff, as well as I've downloaded a ton of medical, agriculture, all the stuff that I would need in case of an emergency. And I've got an old laptop that I put in the box. So that way I've got everything I need in there. So if a Faraday cage, or if in the Faraday box, so something were to happen, I could pull that out and use it. And then I would have tons of information that I would actually need. So that's another way you can prepare for something like that.
Right on.
Yeah, it's certainly, I think it's Michael Faraday that.
Oh yeah, not Louis. Yeah, sorry, I was thinking Louis Pasteur. He was French.
Oh yeah, well there you go. Even with he's an important name to the preparedness movement as well. Louis Pasteur, pasteurization, microbiology.
Exactly. Yep.
It's amazing to me how people, I talked about this not too long ago, and you certainly touched on it, which is the people think about preserving books for survival, building shelter, purifying water. And I'll just reiterate this point, which is that if we had an EMP, I don't think you're going to be wanting to know how to purify water in that immediate moment. If you reached a point where you could open up the laptop and start reading books, you're comfortable, everything's okay, 3 months, 6 months after the the craziness, Eric's, Mad Max world happens and there's normalcy. I suspect a lot of the information you would want would be consistent with the pioneer village, generating power, windmill turn, how to grow crops, self-sustainable sort of lifestyle.
Yeah, that's if we were to get hit by something like that, it would cause major chaos, but it wouldn't be an instantaneous chaos like most people think. It would take a while. It would take several months before things would really start to devolve.
I disagree. Because
Yeah, I was going to say, you think it would take that long?
Well, at least a few weeks, because remember, in our system, even within the just-in-time delivery system and within the actual distribution system, we still have 3 to 4 weeks of food and other perishables.
Right, but that's with everything working properly, like the ATMs, the credit card machines, all the vehicles, all the people going to work. Depends, like all the communications working.
But another thing that you do have to realize is that in times of crisis, a lot of places, people do band together. They do figure out ways to distribute this stuff, to get it out to the people who need it.
With all due respect, and that maybe this is good, we can have a friendly civil discussion. Debate.
Yeah.
I'll point out 2 points. The only known tests on vehicles and EMPs was done through the Department of Defense.
Yes.
It was in the late 80s. And I think long and the short of it is they found that 1 out of every 50 cars would definitely stall with 50,000 volts of electricity. So without knowing the amount of energy coming down, A, B, the impact on the vehicles today, which are much more highly electronically dependent.
Oh yeah, it'd be much higher percentage now.
To be fair, we'll just say it's 1 out of 100. To me, that would say instant chaos, because if you're on the highway and you've got an EMP that happens, imagine 1 out of 100 vehicles suddenly stalling. That's the first thing. The second point I want to suggest is anytime on average, how many airplanes are in the sky? And we don't know the effects on an airplane.
Right.
So could potentially be seen.
Actually, most commercial aircraft are protected against that because they are also protected against direct lightning strikes, and direct lightning strikes are another source of EMP. They generate an EMP, so they are protected against that, and they do have separate isolated systems. But they could get fried. You are right. Some of the ones that don't have adequate shielding.
We can argue that. My contention is because we don't know the severity, the amount of voltage. There's a degree where everybody's got a power bar, right? And it's good if it'll trip and so much voltage goes through it. But at what point, how much voltage goes through where it's superseded to the point where it doesn't work anymore? So my position is with the vehicle analogy, and I can go on and give you other examples. With the airplane analogy, it's possible we could have an EMP that is so severe on society that it would create instant chaos, like literally within half an hour of an EMP. Airplanes crashing into the ground around the planet.
Right.
So
that's right.
People are going to be getting together and hanging out and eating food out of the freezer. No, it's going to be F zone. Welcome. There's validation for Eric and the Lord Humongous. It's just going to be instant reality.
Right. No, that I'm not arguing that point. It's the you're talking about a micro, even more of a macro. Hi, Orthus. Sorry, my dog's barking at me. So what I'm saying is that there's a lot of people out there, especially a lot in the prepper community, that say, oh, it's going to, 80% dead in the population within, a month. No, that's not going to happen. It's going to take longer before we start seeing massive casualties and extreme disruption.
Yeah, I've always heard that is within a year, like 80% of the population within a year is what I've heard. But I wasn't even necessarily thinking along Shay's lines of like the instant afterwards.
Yeah, that's going to happen.
The lines of within a few days afterwards, because once people, like we even saw with coronavirus, how people act with the toilet paper, and right as soon as any word gets out that there's going to be potentially even long-term disruptions of any kind, people are going to start spazzing out and trying to stock up on all sorts of whatever they can, which are just, and even under normal circumstances, if there was disruptions in trucking or the just-in-time inventory system, that stuff would only last 3 days. If there's any sort of increased spike in demand, that might not even last 3 hours.
Yeah. Well, a good example recently is what happened in Texas when they had their grid failure.
Right.
Okay.
But that was
It did
known to
take,
be a localized event. Like if this was something
right.
that there was even an inkling that this was the entire country, like I think it would just be instant chaos.
I don't think I think it would take a while. Even in Texas, it took a few days for people to realize, or it took them about a day and a half, 2 days before they really were in the shit.
Right, but I mean, like there was never in anyone's mind that was it ever even a possibility that this would be extend beyond that you couldn't drive a few hours away and return to normalcy. If that was in question, that this was just the world now, I think that would really get hairy pretty quick.
One of the difficulties with something like this is, one, there's no really any real way to predict how something like this is going to affect, because it's never happened to us before. We really don't have any basis for comparison. So
right, I'm just talking about human nature
human nature,
react to any sort of widespread disruption. That's the key to me. And I've mentioned many times that I think there's a big difference between something that is a localized event and something that could potentially be like a nationwide or God forbid worldwide event. Like I think once that realization started to creep in, I think behavior would start to change really quick.
It would start to change. I think it would take a bit longer than you think, because there are a lot of people out there that they are, there's a lot of good natured people out there that they are nice, and they will help out their community, and they'll figure out a way to do things like food distribution, things like that. They will figure that out. So I think that they will figure it out, but it might take longer for the full effects really to be felt. And that's where I'm saying maybe a month, because the military National Guard and the military would be brought in.
So what would take a month to be uncovered though? Like I don't understand.
Well, that's when we start running out of fuel. That's when we start running out of things like fuel.
Why would we run out of fuel though?
Because you have to have the electricity to have the not just pumps, but also to have the refineries operable.
Right. So if that was happening, if that was a problem from day one, then why would it take months to, like, we couldn't
because we do have stockpiles.
Yeah, but how would we transport that?
Once again, the military
necessarily.
Once again, the military, 90% of most military vehicles are EMP proof. They are designed that way for nuclear strike. Okay.
Right.
A deuce and a half. Okay.
I was in a transportation company. I know.
Right. So
my question is, but the military itself isn't necessarily currently manning all of these massive stockpiles of fuels. A lot of times it's commercially done.
Right. So, but the stockpiles do exist, and the military would be brought in to distribute them to essential services like hospitals, rail transportation, for moving products, food.
Right, but the hospitals, I mean, it all depends to what extent these things are disrupted, because if the hospitals, do they have electricity? Do they have their communications? Because if they don't, then none of this works. And I think that even if, like what you're saying, everything goes smoothly, what you're saying with all the National Guard is able to get everybody in, they're able, or the active duty units or whatever, they're able to go to these places, they're able to get the HEMT tankers and fill them up at these facilities. How many different places are they distributing this? Like, there's not that many of these tankers that the National Guard has. They're only going to go to the big, important government city centers, and everywhere else is going to be out from day one. And it's not going to take, even if they're not, say New York City or something, how long is it going to take the National Guard to bring in fuel for the police into New York City? It could take days, if not weeks. And I think everything would be all of a sudden chaotic way before that.
It would be. Like I said, though, I mean, we really don't have any way to understand. There are contingency plans that have been put into place by the Army, by FEMA, though we know how effective they are.
Right, that's my point.
Yeah, exactly. But there are plans, though. They actually have war gamed this out. They have planned this out. There's a lot of municipal agencies that have done this. There are a lot of state agencies. There's a lot of federal agencies that have actually gone through the scenario. There was a big thing about it a few years ago in the media and in the government, where they were looking at how vulnerable our system is to something like that. And we are extremely vulnerable. And of course, they didn't act on it.
Right. So that's why I
As
don't
always.
necessarily share your optimism, but it's good
Well,
to hear the other side.
it'll take longer to get down to that, basic agrarian level of society that people think. And it will take longer than what some people think. There will be that initial crash of things going to hell. That will happen. You are correct there. That will happen. But when that does happen, you see the people react in one of two ways. They either panic and freak out, or they get together and they try and figure out how they're going to make it work. And a lot of times people do. A lot of times people figure out, hey, we can make this work. And that's where preparedness also comes in, is because leadership, if you're able to be a leader in that and say, hey, okay, guys, we need to get our community together to figure out how we're going to make sure everything works for us, even if it's a small community. That is something that you can prepare for as well.
I hear you, man. And you got a lot of, I don't share your optimism. That's very good, positive outlook that you have. But to me, financial collapse, violent pandemic, insert, the disaster. Yeah, we're going to come together. EMP, Carrington event style EMP events. I disagree. I see F mode. I see the people that come out of the woodwork 6 months, 8 months, 10 months later that's maybe when we may see some leadership.
Mhm.
But after that, it's going to be one long months of a nightmare leading up to that.
I think it could be a couple months. I'm not sure, anything longer than that.
Okay, so when you see 2 months, we have an EMP such as the Carrington event.
Yeah.
What are people going to be doing in 2 months? Let's say
After
we have
2 months?
After you said 2 months, yeah.
Yeah, about after 2 months. People will start working together. They will start trying to figure out how that, because even in most natural disasters where things like that happen, neighbors help neighbors. You do see that. There are going to be the outliers. There are going to be some places. Look at natural disasters, hurricanes, earthquakes, floods. There are a lot of benevolent organizations out there and a lot of people that are there to help their community. Now, it may take, like I said, it may take like 2 months before them to get organized enough and get to the point where they can do that.
Well, that's
But
my
it will take
perspective,
a
though,
while.
is if it takes 2 months to get organized, the vast majority of people cannot survive 2 months without that just being and so even if something is simple, I'm assuming that you're talking about this as well, but I'm looking at it from the perspective of like there's a widespread power outage. So for most, in this theoretical event we're talking about, most of the country is without at least consistent power. So that alone, to me, is instant chaos. You have how many people do you have on ventilators? How many people do you have that are, or just everything that we do uses electricity? And most people, the vast majority of people, are not at all prepared to do any of what they need to do without electricity.
Yeah, and when we do, and we
started.
Right, and when we do see this, what I anticipate more is where we'll see mass exoduses from major metropolitan areas. People are just going to say, "I'm leaving." Hey, there's word going around that such and such place has power. Well, I'm going there. They're going to get out because life has become unsustainable there. So we are going to see mass migrations as well.
I think so. Yeah, but I mean, to me, that is chaos. Like
that is
a situation where you're not going to have a widespread rule of law in that type of situation. You can't.
Right.
So I mean, I don't see how that's not insane chaos. Like, yeah, there will be groups of people that are trying to get orderly and get things together, but there's not going to be enough resources to go around. There's always that percentage of the population that are just going to do things as maliciously as they want to serve their own needs, or possibly sociopathic, you know what I mean? And or just criminal minded, the dark prepper types, even like Chase talks about. And I think to me, that's always been the cutoff point between like a manageable or localized shit the fan and like a massive like movie style shit the fan is if you lose power or grid down widespread. And I think that's, to me, if you have widespread grid down, you're looking at like movie type chaos from day one.
I appreciate your optimism. I think I'll throw another twist into
go for it.
Auction I got it, dude. I appreciate your optimism. It's like you're pro mankind.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I hope you're right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I like the way things are now. I don't want them to go to hell.
Yeah, I like the internet.
Me too. I love it.
Last thing I want is an EMP. But the reality is, in my opinion, it's what's different between today and the Carrington event back in the 1850s.
Oh yeah.
The difference is our dependency on the technology, our psychological addiction to these.
That's right. That's a great point. That's a great point. Watch the first millennial freak out when their phone doesn't work.
Exactly. So with that huge degree, plus the most ignorant, disrespectful, narcissistic, self-entitled generation of kids is basically what we're contending with as well. So
Right.
the psychological impact, and I got goodwill, but if I wasn't a prepper and I got goodwill and I need to feed my kid,
yeah. No, there is good. That's really what's going to be one of the hardest things to deal with for the majority of the population.
Yeah, leadership isn't going to be on the top of my. It's not going to be kumbaya, or at least the picture that.
Oh no.
That, and like, dude, it's good that we have this conflict so people can sort of come to their own conclusions, decisions, and thank you for being civil with this. But I certainly, and I'm pro humanity. I see a much darker outlook. I don't see people coming together. This is the one disaster that had happened. We're F mode. Like this is the real fucking thing.
No, I
agree.
Yeah, and I've thought about it a lot, and there is a lot of validity in your viewpoint and in what you say. I mean, that you do make some very good points, and I will admit to that. But I also think that what a lot of people do is they, in the prepper community, is they also do fail to take into account that there are some people who do. Like that there are some very community-minded people and some very benevolent people out there that when an emergency happens, they're there to help out. And I think we're underestimating that entirely, or not entirely, but we're underestimating it quite a bit. So I think that there is some of that we do need to factor in, because a lot of what I see in a lot of these, scenarios from the preparedness community is primarily doom and gloom. It's and they don't take into account that, yes, there is that horrible human nature, but there's the good human nature as well that we fail to take into account.
It's an interesting perspective. I definitely appreciate it. I'm going to have to probably cut you off there for time.
Go for it.
And so we'll leave you with the last word then as far as that goes. So I appreciate you stopping by once again. Colorado Biker Prepper, we will talk to you in the future, I'm sure.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys. Great discussion. Loved it.
We gotta have you on. Like, we gotta make a regular segment. Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, hopefully I'll be coming through Vegas soon, and I'll let you know when I'm in town.
Hit me up on email.
Yeah, I'll buy you a beer.
Sounds good. I'll hold you on to that.
Okay.
Right.
Bye.
See you. All right. So everyone, appreciate you watching. We ran a little bit long, but no big deal. So yeah, we will see you next week, and hopefully we should have guests next time as well. Got a long list. So
okay, scrambling.
No, I like doing it every once in a while, yeah. But the guests always go over well. It's great to see good, different perspective, and it worked out well. So appreciate you guys all watching. You got any last words, Che? Anything you want to direct our audience to?
I'm good. Prepper Logic's my channel. I just started the Advanced Prepper Concepts series, first video on my channel.
Check it out, guys.
It's about an exploit with handle operators and how we can use existing information online to track down preppers around us. So it's a unique concept, and part 2 is coming out on the 14th.
Okay.
And, called First Contact. Eric, thanks for your time tonight. Colorado Biker, thank you so much. That was cool. I know we're kind of battling it out there.
I think that's good though, because it's just civil. You know what I mean? So it's good to see, because it forces everyone else to kind of work through the idea in their head too, and think how they're really going to see it. But I do agree with him. These people are out there. My general quick perspective on that is that they're vastly outnumbered, simply put.
Yes.
So the people who crave and work towards order and altruism and everything are just going to be vastly outnumbered in a situation like that.
Yeah, primitive behaviors of taking survival of the fittest is going to take over. That mentality, I think.
And even most of those people are not prepared. You know what I mean? So even as altruistic and order craving as they may be, they just will be limited in what they actually can do. So
I like that we got rid of him first, so we can.
And then now we're just dismantle the company. Yeah, exactly. No, that wasn't the idea, but.
So you're wrong, Colorado Biker.
Yeah, but because of this and this and this. No.
I appreciate it. I really do appreciate it. We got to have a regular segment with him, because he's certainly an intelligent individual. So peace, everybody. Thanks for coming out. We'll see you next week.
Yep. See you guys.